The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand, and we gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise, to get what we want, we got to organize.
Blessings, greetings, everyone. Thank you for watching. I am here, Jesse, with my comrade Jamilah, and we are repping the All African People's Revolutionary Party, part of the Kaji Circle. For those of you who don't know, the All African People's Revolutionary Party was started by Kwame Nkrumah in 1968, and the objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define as a total, united, liberated Africa under scientific socialism. And we have an exciting topic today. We're going to talk about revolutionary love and what that looks like. It's going to be a fun conversation.
Yes, our ancestors today were definitely about revolutionary love of the people. And two comrades we're honoring today. And I want to apologize in advance because as you know, we've been having tech issues. So the setup I have today, I am on the phone. So it's going to be a little strange. Just wanted to say that. But no here, no there. We are honoring the ancestors and whatever setup we are doing work to honor them. So hopefully they're okay with that. The ancestors we're honoring are Alain Sito, Diatta, and she was a young Senegalese organizer against French colonialism. During World War II, she led a movement for tax resistance and improvement of conditions for workers. She was also one of the leaders of a boycott in response to the seizure of rice crops by the French to support their war. After being identified as one of the leaders, she was jailed in Mali. Her physical passing existed while she was imprisoned. Another ancestor we are honoring is Charles Deland. We do not learn about any African liberation struggle, any revolutionary organizing for enslaved Africans. We do not generally learn in these capitalist institutions. They talk about American Revolution all day, every day. They talk about how Africans were enslaved and the struggles we went to, maybe for about 5 seconds. And then there was the civil rights movement, you know, some people sat on a bus or whatever. There were so many struggles that were going on, waged against the oppressor by enslaved Africans, hundreds of them. And Charles Deland was one of the folks who led what is arguably the largest revolutionary struggle in existence for liberation of African enslaved people. So he was in Haiti, or Saint Domingue in Haiti. After the Haitian Revolution, he was sent to New Orleans, and to being of mixed ethnicity, he was given the role of overseer on the woodland plantation of Colonel Manuel Andre. There were 86 enslaved Africans on this plantation. Between the 8th and the 11th of January in 1811, so the 8th of January at that time was known as Carnival Day, ended up into Mardi Gras. And he was taking cues from the revolution in Haiti. Deland, he committed class suicide. As you know, he was the overseer, but he said, you know what? I'm gonna take cues from what I'm doing and use that to liberate my people. So he committed class suicide and organized hundreds of other enslaved Africans to what is said to be about 500 enslaved Africans. And it is known as the largest slave revolt in US history. It's called the German Coast Uprising of 1811. As the enslaver class was out partying because they were celebrating Carnival Day, the Africans were meeting up and strategizing against their oppression to organize towards establishment of a free African republic. At least 3 sugar plantations were destroyed. To send a message to other enslaved Africans, Deland's hands were cut off and he was shot in both legs and then burned. So this is what they do with us. It's like, well, we're going to take these leaders and we're going to assassinate them, kidnap them, or whatever to show you what's going to happen if you organize against the system of oppression. So understanding what was at stake, especially as a role of an overseer, he also understood that the people's liberation was bigger than anything he would experience as an individual. So here's where we get to what the love of the people actually means. And one of the things that I want to address are some quotations around love of the people actually means, because when we talk about love, what do we talk about when we talk about love under a capitalist system, Jesse?
Consumption, constant consumption. Love under capitalism would be demonstrable consumption, like constantly buying and showing actionable things that are material, but not necessarily value through the action, but just kind of like transactional to appear to have more even. So a lot of it is just honest as well, I would say.
Yeah, it's definitely additional, is that it's upon giving someone something, but it is a material item. It is something that's not necessarily deemed as being from the heart. That possibly it could be, but it's like, well, I love this person, so I have to give them this item. I have to give them this flower. I have to give them this stuffed ball. I have to give them whatever it is. To me, that is a very conditional thing. It's like our relationship is driven upon giving each other things that are material, but the immaterial connection between people is not emphasized under this capitalist structure of what's defined as love. And even when people talk about conditional love, how that's rooted under capitalism, it's still a thing very reactionary, because it's like, well, if I love someone unconditionally, that means I have to see them as perfect. That means they can't do any wrong in my eyes.
Right.
But what a true love is, if we are to love our people, we have to have an amount of criticism in order to understand that the people need to be liberated. So what is the problem here? So we have to address each other. We have a criticism, self-criticism process in order to say, how can we, for ourselves and each other, how can we help each other out in this structure that is not for us, that is inhumane? So, and when people talk about unconditional love, it's usually, being a stand for a celebrity, or if somebody's saying, even the unconditional love, or how it's spoken about conditioning, if you're in this abusive relationship, why don't you just leave? Without understanding the particular structures of that exist, without understanding the economic disparities that exist in relationships. Sometimes people have children. Where are they going to go? That person might be houseless with children. We do not understand the systemic and material conditions that cause people to stay in particular relationships that are not necessarily to anything positive. So while you're saying, why don't you just leave? Are you contributing to a solution to help them leave?
Right.
So that is where the unconditional love comes from, understanding what the root of the problem is, identifying the problem, and creating a solution to either alleviate of that problem. Capitalism, love is not seen in that way. It's seen as this all-encompassing thing where you give your time and your energy to distract yourself from the problem they have created. We have to look at love in this way. First of all, are we organizing for our people? That is the first question. If you love your people,
what you doing?
It can't just be, right? It can't just be love of our culture. And what exactly is our culture? It is a culture that capitalism has created. Talk about Black Panther. I'm not talking about the organized masses of people who the Black Panther Party for self-defense. I'm talking about this Disney Marvel movie where people like, oh, I love my people, Wakanda. Right. It's like, no, that is a situation that was created and promoted and used the people's love and desire to have something that is positive in our lives. They profited off of that. So is that really love? So we have to think about what love for our people actually is. So the first question is, if you love your people, is it just a cultural aspect that you love, or is it everything that comes with it? Is it the positive and the negative? And when you see the negative, again, do you have solutions named to work on to address those negative aspects? So for instance, there have been a lot of conversations around freeing Mutulu Shakur. So one thing Mutulu Shakur loved his people, continues to love his people, but he addressed the medical inequities that existed. So there was the Lincoln Medical Center, and there were some comrades with Mutulu Shakur, and they said, okay, the allopathic medicine isn't really dealing with the consistent drug issues and struggles that exist in our communities. So we can utilize acupuncture as a way of healing. We can utilize natural medicine as a way of dealing. That is a way you love your people. You commit that love into action. You just don't say you love your people and don't address the issue and participate in a solution. That's one way of doing that. And before I shut up, I want to really
you come in with the fire.
I want to have a couple of quotes, because addressing the larger issues of love as well, we are taught to not only love oppressors as an individual situation or person, we are trained to love the system of oppression itself. And one of the things we don't question, I know more and more people are addressing this now, but there's a person named Dred Scott. Of course, he named himself after the person who sued for freedom against the US government, and of course lost, because Africans are not considered full humans in the US. In one way or another, I know that they sort of slipped into law that, okay, y'all are humans. But again, we have to look at the larger system. You can write something, but what's the actions that are in existence right now? Are Africans still full humans in the United States? That's the question we ask ourselves. That's a whole other episode. But Dred Scott, so this artist named Dred Scott, he produced a recreation with a more positive outcome of the 1811 revolution. Someone commented on this. I thought this was, it was very plain, but also very profound. And they said, you can't escape or avoid history when the villains' names are memorialized on the streets. The universities, the street names, the statues, all of these things are relics of a time when African enslavement was going on, but there's still a present tense of that with the prison industrial complex. You have these military bases named after enslavers. You have all of these things. So for us to practice this American exceptionalism, just accept, well, whatever, slavery's over, it was like 1863, Lincoln freed the slaves, So we memorialize all of these people without understanding, again, going back to this series of revolutionary actions of 1811. No one freed us but us. And to say, and then I'm going to shut up. Now I'm going to say another quote and then I'm going to shut up.
No, keep going.
But to say that we are not our ancestors, my response to that is going to be, no, you're not, because you're sitting there on a computer and not doing anything and just saying there's a problem. But you're not doing anything to create a solution. You're not in an organization. How can you say we are not our ancestors when we literally honor our ancestors every single week on this program? How can you say we are not our ancestors when there's literally, even like you can say the names of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, you can say the names of Martin Luther King, you can say all the names of these people and be like, yeah, Martin Luther King Day, all of this, and say we're not our ancestors. So the hundreds upon hundreds of people who were organizing So you can sit there on the computer and say, we're not our ancestors. Are you telling me that you're not disrespecting your ancestors? That you're not disrespecting Fannie Lou Hamer?
Right.
We
Well, I
are
would
not our
say,
ancestors. No, you are not your
right.
ancestors. That's why that's coming out of your mouth. So I wanted to say that. And I also wanted to have a quote, which is the root of what this episode is about. And this is coming from Assata Shakur. She talked about deciding on our name. Says, I decided on Assata Olugbala Shakur. Assata means she struggles. Olugbala means love for the people. So you were telling me, yes, Assata is not an ancestor. The contributions that Comrade Assata made, for you to sit here and say that is disrespectful to Assata. You can't say Assata taught me if you're totally disrespecting her legacy and the people who she learned from, her ancestors, who are our ancestors, who are not them. So I just wanted to say that. I am
right. No, I'm appreciative of all of that, because I think those sentiments come from not understanding the history and the knowledge that comes from our people. So many of us are confused due to constant propaganda, and people are just taught. I was just thinking, as you said, we're taught to love our oppressors. Like, that's such a deep quote. And it's very true, because the systems have just put in so much time to keep us kind of in this state of celebration for those that have not contributed to the struggle, but have instead advanced their own careers and have made money for themselves and for these institutions, as opposed to actually working for the people and doing what it takes to even put yourself in a position where you would have your hands taken off and burned because you decided to go that far for your people. I mean, it speaks to the history, it speaks to the herstory, to the theirstory, it speaks to just the legacy of our people and what it means to care for this struggle. Because it's, as you mentioned, we got to acknowledge that there's a problem. We got a problem, you know, like this problem is eating us up. We can't just sit by and acknowledge it without bringing forth those solutions. And obviously organizing is chief among them, because we understand with organizing, we're not going to just be comfortable with the status quo and to just the acceptance of, oh, well, maybe, yeah, it's bad, but we can't do nothing about it. No, collectively, we can do something about it. And it's like, and in order to do something about it, you got to know that there's a problem. I just think that's still like ringing in my ears, because every day you realize just how far this problem extends itself. It's in architecture. We're currently reading a book in our anti-patriarchy work study where we're reading about how architecture has been used to advance patriarchy. And obviously there's so many details to just this, but it's like everything around us, you know, like this is a struggle and it's something we have to commit our lives to. And that's what love for the people looks like to me. It's like, I have to learn about my people. I have to figure out what are my talents, what are my abilities, what am I able to do to advance this struggle? Because it's one thing just sitting around acting like, okay, this happened, there's nothing for us to do, when there's been such a legacy left for us to do something about it.
There's so many books out there. People watch YouTube all day. There's so many YouTube videos, commentaries, interviews. There's just so much proof out there, documentaries where people learn about what folks did and groundwork for what we can do today and actually do today. Going back to say, we're not our ancestors, it doesn't make sense to me. So one of the things that we addressed last time, and I want to address again, people who are colonized in the imperial core, you know, talk about how they hate capitalist media, but then echo the same sentiments as capitalist media. You know, like, well, our ancestors died for the right to vote, or, well, if we don't vote for Biden, then Trump's going to get in or Republicans going to get in. But yet, why is the cops killing us? Don't you think that the structure of the police is intertwined with the same structure that you're voting into? That would make sense to me in a keen study of history, understanding again what the root of this is coming from. And so to make use of the internet and your time on the internet and not find any of this. It's interesting to me that you can be on social media all day. Again, not on social media. So I know that it's groomed to dictate a particular point of view. So if you're not looking for revolutionary stuff, it's going to be not as easy to find. I understand that. Again, I'm addressing the people who are complaining there's a problem. Why are the police doing this? Why, oh, well, the government's doing this. And yet you still contribute to the same system by voting into the system. You can't say, I've had this discussion so many times. How can you say you want to get rid of a white supremacist in office and vote another one in? You're contributing to the problem.
Right.
The system of unconditional love. I feel like how we are conditioned to learn and understand unconditional love, it's self-destructive to continue to you want to talk about, oh, why don't you leave your abuser? But you're voting for your abuser.
Right. You're voting abuser.
For it. So we're talking about abuse in individual situations and not understanding, all of the structures that were not created by us. Like you talk about, we're in a racist system. We are what? Yes, we are at war. I absolutely agree with you on that point, but not the tactics in which you are advocating for. So how much do you love your people if you continue to vote in these white supremacists who enact, author, etc., white supremacist policies? Because you're looking at this sort of micro of like, well, here's overt white supremacists, but I'm okay with stabbed in the back by who literally is not a covert one, who literally signed the 1994 or authored the 1990 crime bill.
I didn't read that.
And by another white supremacist. So it's out there. It's been out there
right.
for years. So you have Joe Biden, who in 1977 now, this is not, this is the 50s, advocated for segregation in the US government. He was senator. So not knowing this history, there's no excuse for that. If you're voting for someone, you research a person. You can't talk about, again, what the problem is without understanding the root of the problem and then saying, okay, we have to figure out a solution. There have been plenty of examples of solution that we talked about with Shakur. There's another quote from Assata, Shakur. So people get used to anything. The less you think about your oppression, the more your tolerance for it grows. This is what we're talking about. After a while, people just think oppression is the normal state of things. But to become free, you have to be acutely aware of being a slave. And so the language of what enslavement is, people, well, and slavery's over, but there's the prison industrial complex. There's no wage slave. There's outsourcing jobs. So people get paid way less than minimum wage because there are not particular minimum wage laws in those countries get outsourced in the same way as here. So people also complain about, well, these undocumented, but there's always been aspects of that where folks who were migrant workers, they unionized, they protested, they boycotted. So these things have always been happening. If you love your people, what actions are you going to take? You didn't get here by yourself. You came through somebody. That person you came through also came through somebody else. And there's that lineage. So we wouldn't be here without those people.
Right.
So if I say I love my people, I'm going to make sure that their legacy is continued and sealed. Not teaching us about Nat Turner. Yeah, I was a kid, I've heard of Turner, whatever. Again, say, okay, Nat Turner did this thing. Like we don't learn about Denmark Vesey. We don't learn about people in these schools that waged struggle against the oppressors and said, you know what, we're gonna plan at night. We're gonna do this, that, and the other to massa. We don't learn that in school.
No. Well, I mean, I'm glad you said that because as you were talking about our comrade Assata, Shakur, I have her book, and there's a quote that I really enjoy where she says, "The usual way that people are taught to think in America is that each subject is in its little compartment and has no relation to any other subject. For the most part, we receive fragments of unrelated knowledge, and our education follows no logical format or pattern. It is exactly this kind of education that produces people who don't have the ability to think for themselves and who are easily manipulated." And that is that on that, because we are easily manipulated when we we dislocate our memories and we don't connect the struggle to a wider struggle, and we understand the importance of having international solidarity, because it's not just us struggling. But obviously here in America, in the Imperial Core, we're just taught that, oh yeah, just focus on this. But if we're not focusing on the fact that this is a system, we're going to easily be manipulated and led to believe that it's the individual as opposed to the system that's constantly producing this perpetual blame and it just repeats over and over and over. And there's that confusion.
I think reading, for instance, reading the Green Book and learning about the Jamilah Party in Libya and how there is a people's struggle waged and how NATO and other forces worked to destroy the Jamilah and work to destroy the infrastructure of Libya. I mean, that's one thing we can learn, and not just go, well, but really learn about the history of how these political parties came to be. Really study the Cuban Revolution and how that came to be, studying the Batista government and then learning how that transitioned through a revolutionary process and how that revolutionary process continues to this day. And they're like, okay, yeah, you got a blockade on us, but we're still gonna wage struggle. We're not just giving you Assata. Like, we don't work on conditions. Like, everything is conditional. Everything is transactional. We don't work that way as revolutionaries. That's the other thing where, love is based on some sort of transaction as opposed to something that's relational under capitalism. So I think that is in many ways why we don't address love as revolutionary. People look at love as being, well, it's maudlin, it's sentimental, I don't know, like love, people just stay in love and they don't do the work. I was like, that's not
right. No,
it's not how true love works. It's like, it's okay that you can get married. It's okay that you have to, then you build those people in the new family you are building on that way, you build them to be part of the revolutionary struggle. It doesn't stop just getting married. So again, people look at marriage, people look at all of these things as conditional and transactional. So what do? You sign a document from the state. Okay, we're married now, and fighting to be in a relationship and recognized by the state, which of course is oppressive. And I'm not even talking about just the institution of marriage or whatever. It's just like the state recognizing who can get married. Of course, that's oppressive. And the consenting adults who pay taxes somehow are not deemed in a relationship that's, worthy of being acknowledged under a capitalist system. The recognition that you have to sign these documents and fighting even for the basic right to love another consenting adult. Like, what does that even mean to a system? Even that's another aspect of love that is conditional and transactional. So when we think about how we love one another, and when we say we love one another, and how we show up for one another in times of struggles, again, me being, it is a year since, not in March, it'll be a year since I've been an amputee, but it is now officially a year where I've essentially been a disabled person. So, being in the hospital for a few months and being by a truck and everything. But one thing I learned is that people who say they love you, when you are going through a particular trauma like that, people do not show up. So again, this is how capitalism doesn't train us to deal with our emotions when it comes to trauma, because the system itself is so traumatic, and the family cycles are traumatic and abuse happens and so many things happen that we're trying to deal with our own stuff. So when someone else is going through something that's way more traumatic than, possibly something that person's going through, it's like, okay, you just learn to shut down because capitalism doesn't enable us to deal pain in healthy ways. So showing up for people in a way that's communal, showing up for ways in people that's compassionate and not transactional. Even I think the other thing about love is that we expect like, oh, we love with someone, we have to be like, we have to come with all our might and not give ourselves space to say, hey, here's the capacity I have. Just because my capacity is not as much, that doesn't mean I love you any less. But to not show up at all.
I think that's a very good point. Yeah, I mean, addressing the capacity thing is a huge deal because a lot of folks, you go into something, and if you don't have the capacity, it's best to communicate that. But you could still show up for somebody, even if it's not like going all the way and making a parade for somebody. Like no one is even asking for that. I think that's very important to remember. Like it's just being there, and also just knowing that you could give that person an agency by asking them if there's something that you would have them to do, or that they would have you do, to just help, make the situation a little bit more democratic. So it's not like they have to be obligated to do or say in this manner. So, I mean, that's a very important, love, as you said, it's just taught for us to just be transactional, just to take, okay, now that I took this thing, I can give you this thing, as opposed to knowing that it's a relationship, and those relationships have intricate, details, and that needs to be communicated. And that communication is what a lot of folks are afraid to have, because again, what if you called out? What if that thing is addressed and it strikes up something that you were trying to avoid? Yeah, well, then that means let's hash it out. Let's talk about it and reach for that resolution. And because society is also very narcissistic and self-serving and self-indulgent, there's been so much almost like advancing that sentiment. Like it's okay to be rude. It's okay to not struggle with folks and just cut off people, block off people. A lot of folks, when they deal with challenges, they don't really understand what those challenges are about, because they're like, nah, this person wronged me. I'm about to block them. I'm about to get rid of them. I'm about to just ghost them even. And all of those things are obviously characteristics of the capitalist system, because it's not dealing with it. It's avoiding it. It's hiding. It's, pushing the responsibility on the other person, as opposed to understanding that there's that dialectical relationship.
Yeah, and I think that's what is definitely missing when we have a difficulty of engaging with other folks' trauma. So this idea that, well, I have to take on their struggles as well as mine, that's not humane at all. So again, having a dialectical conversation, it's just like, okay, I know that you're struggling with this thing, but this is gone. That is a humane and democratic way of understanding a particular relationship we have. Getting back to the point about the capitalism of relationships and how capitalism views unconditional love, I think that's where that struggle comes in. If I say that I love you and I'm not there for you 100%, whatever we're conditioned to look at 100%, that means I'm a bad person. No, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. That just means that you have a particular capacity within the amount of things that you are able to stand at that time, perhaps because of whatever traumas you've dealt with, perhaps because you don't have the facilities to deal with the type of trauma the other person experienced. But we have to be honest with ourselves on that. It's something that's also part of that larger political structure, because everything's political. Even the relationships.
Everything is political. And honestly, I just want to share a story, not to cut you off, but you reminded me of something I wanted to share, because I'm driving here in cold Minneapolis, and I had a moment where I was driving and I noticed, my reactions while I'm driving. And it's like, okay, Jesse, you do suffer with road rage. Like, this is something that's a problem, because you're out, you're saying all this stuff. And while no one can hear you and you're in the comfort of your own car, it made me uncomfortable to hear how I was speaking not really respecting others on the road, and just this mindset of someone, just having to be patient and understanding that, you're sharing this road. This is not about you. This is a delicate experience every time you do it. Why are you, like, I had to interrogate with myself. And going back to the political angle, it's like, yo, you are an organizer. You're out here talking about you a revolutionary. You're aiming to be. How are you responding to the interactions, whether you're in a car or whether you're walking? Like, how are you really dealing with that? And so I had to just address that to myself as a point of knowledge. Like, okay, whenever you're in this car and you're in this situation, how are you handling with that? If you want to say something, say it in your mind and deal with it as it is. You don't need to be speaking that out loud, because it, like I said, it just made me feel uncomfortable. And it made me just understand that we're just almost accepted, like, oh, you're in your own little thing, you can speak on it. But it's like, yeah, but how is that even making you feel? How are you, do you need to hear that? I mean, it was triggering even for me. And I was like, okay, see, no, I don't have to respond this way. So it's just like, again, interrogating, what are you doing to solve it? How are you able to understand that it can be corrected?
Self-love is not just, giving yourself a hot bath. Those are things do, but that's not what it equates. So, I'm going for a pedicure, or, I'm going for a massage. Yeah, those are nice things you do yourself, but that does not equate self-love. And I think the thing you're talking about is acceptance of, being able to critique yourself. And when you're not able to do that, you haven't fully accepted yourself. None of us are perfect. We all have contradictions. And to address that, you ask yourself those questions. Wait a minute, I'm an organizer. What am I doing that's contradicting that organizing in my own life? What relationships do I have in my life that's contradicting my attitudes? Me yelling at people, not understanding those people's situations either. They've, experienced something that's traumatic themselves. So, again, have to take all these things on where you're like, oh no, I'm just terrible person. No, that's not what it's about. But really looking at, y'all talking about ideology. So it's a set of ideas that guide our thoughts and actions. Yeah. So if we have in Kwame Ture's ideology, how is that guiding our thoughts and actions? If it comes down to something as simple as how we're viewing other people on the road, those people on the road are potential organizers in the A-APRP. You're looking at them, it's just like, oh, you're taking up space on the road, not understanding their situation. Yeah. So those questions we ask ourselves and continue this work and honor the ancestors, the more we begin to check and say, okay, what's my interaction even in my thoughts to myself? Because there is a code of conduct, if you will, that's stated in the beginning of Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. So it talks about those very things that you're addressing. It may not say road rage or whatever, but really taking account of our thoughts, how we treat folks who are marginalized, how we see ourselves in the situation, and how we're going to respond to react to things. So I think that is a huge part of self-love, and it is an ongoing journey. Like, absolutely. You saying you love yourself, that doesn't end, because you're going to be faced with a series of contradictions in your life. So you can say, I love myself. And again, getting to the capitalist version of love, you're like, well, I'm just going to settle for this love, and whatever, people just have to come along with me for the ride. That's just not how it works, because you're going to meet different kinds of people every day in your life, and they're going to test your ideology every single day in your life.
Ooh, come on with that. So, and when that happens, you like, see, I mean, because I remember before I was in the party, that's one of the things you told me about. You like, this organization, you're gonna lose some friends. Not everybody gonna be down with what you're saying. And I never understood it at the time. But obviously, even just being in this organization for about 2 years, I'm just talking to my family and my friends. It's like, yeah, it ain't gonna just be like it ain't a gravy train with biscuit wheels, like they say. You're gonna have to struggle and really deal with just the contradictions that show up every day, whether it's entertainment, whether it's, the new shows that are out, the conversations that are around town, like all of those things are political. And it does put you in the seat of which you're able to just be like, all right, I got to come with an ideological, run back that's actually sound. And, you're just not speaking. It's just like Miles said, investigate, or you just don't speak, right? So that at least you want to know what you're dealing with. So, but yeah, that's an everyday thing. And it's something that definitely reminds me, you ain't going to just graduate when it comes to self-love. Like that's going to be an everyday process that you have to take yourself with.
Absolutely. What does love for people actually mean? And that does include self-love. If you're going to struggle enough to wage war against oppression for the liberated people, you do have to love yourself enough to do that. Like, you're not going to go, well, I'm a horrible person, whatever, and then do this work for other people. Right. It's going to show in your actions. So right. there has to be a particular type of self-love that exists. And someone who is like, yeah, I love myself, but not doing any type of criticism does not love themselves. Because to have any amount of self-love, you have to have humility. That's just what it is. Yeah. So, someone who's not willing to be in a process of self-criticism or organizational criticism, like, well, anything wrong, and you're doing it wrong. Right. So there's a quote from U.E.P. Newton. It says, I think what motivates people is not great hate, but great love for other people. So I think, obviously there's love and hate, and we look at dialectics and everything, but you have to hate particular systems of oppression enough to love people. Someone's saying, well, I love my people or whatever. You don't hate the system enough to love people, because you're sitting there on the internet going back, talking about the problem and voting in these white supremacists and yay Wakanda. So you're doing all of these symbolic things saying you love your people, but you are not there organizing with any type of liberatory organization. You haven't created your own organization. There are plenty out there you can find.
But I was there. I was there when they organized. I walked with them and I saw them do the work, and I can recall. I mean, there's a lot of that. So, anyways,
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you were there at the lunch counter. I'm sure you were there at the school walkout. I'm sure you were there signing some sort of petition. But what did you do beyond that? I'm sure you did all of that, my friend.
It got to continue as we speaking about love it every day. Like the struggle, a luta continuo, right? Like,
yeah,
come on.
And well, that's the other thing. If you have all of this knowledge, you read all of the books, you have all the information, and you're withholding it, you don't love your people, because you're withholding. You're like, well, how come you don't know it? Like, why don't you share it with people?
Right.
Your people. At all. You're taking all of this information with you to the grave that you know.
There's that elitism that goes on. Right.
You could have started an organization and committed to establishing a work-study process with all that information that you say you know. But you don't love your people enough. So I think, again, getting to the aspect of what is under capitalism, well, I don't know. Like, I have all this information, but, you just have to do so much organizing, and I just don't have the time. And just organizing more than yourself. You're not an organization with just one person. So you find people, you talk to people every day of your life. I mean, even I'm sure during this pandemic, people talk on Zoom. People talk on the phone to their family members. People have friends. And if you're not talking about any stuff ideologically, and again, withholding it for yourself, what are you doing? And be like, right. I don't know. I mean, I want to start an organization, but are you talking about it with anyone? Because it starts with talking about it with people, and then building a program. So it's an idea like anything else. Sekou Touré had an idea. Amilcar Cabral had an idea. All of these people had ideas based on the conditions of the people, and they loved their people enough to establish a political education program based on other things they studied. So Amilcar Cabral, like all of these people were like, oh, Marx, has some good ideas. Okay, well, we'll take that and apply a lot of that to our people and do it in a way which fits the condition of our people. So they had to start from somewhere, and for you to sit and say, well, I don't know. I know I have these skills. I know I have the knowledge, but no one's going to help me. The people, you were, again, on the phone every day with people. At least 10% of those people have the skills that you can utilize with them to organize. So it's just like, at least I guarantee you that every single person on this earth knows one person that's in an organization, whatever organization that is, whether, it's a revolutionary organization, a liberal, or even those like right wing, whatever.
Right.
Everybody knows at least one person as an organization. Whether or not you were that organization, that's one thing. But you are friends with that person. You are family with that person. You may engage in ideological struggle with that person, but they might have the skills to give you that you can utilize for your revolutionary organization.
Absolutely.
You don't have to do it like them. Again, if you don't find any organizations that you're happy with, create your own.
Create your own.
Utilize the skills, and then find that knowledge you have about the revolutionary organizations that existed. Take the skills you have in this day and age and utilize that with the knowledge you have there. Find another person. You have two people. There, you're an organization. Sit there and say, I don't know. I guarantee you know somebody. Start your organization. Lowndes County Freedom Organization, end up Black Panthers.
Right.
Like it started from somewhere. It's like the condition of people were not conducive to our liberation. So people like, we got to do something about it. So I'm just like, what are you talking about? So yeah, that's another example, because we're going to talk about solutions.
Yeah.
It can happen. So we looked at particular communities when Oregon, like anybody who knows any level of anything about Oregon, not a lot of African people there. So we looked at a particular community in Portland where the majority of Africans were. We went door, asked people what their needs were. We said, hey, we're building this thing. We did a free school. We did the free breakfast, and we communicate with other organizations and work to build this. So it can happen. Again, organizations that we began to work on these things with didn't necessarily have a similar ideology, but again, what the problem is. People understand the core problem.
Right.
You can deal with whatever differences that you have ideologically, but you got to work together on the issue, because this is a mass issue. Oh, I don't know. It's just no.
That's just excuses. I mean, you just reminded me. Right. There's too much at stake. And I'm reminded of what Malcolm X said when he was like, I'm a Muslim, but leave your religion at home. And we're talking about this liberation thing. Like, we gotta fight this issue of capitalism. So like, we can put that aside. A lot of us, we focus on these other issues. We argue in public. We do all of this divisive, reactionary stuff on Twitter, where everyone's able just to see all of our dirt. That's what the Black Panther Party had to struggle with. Like, we got to learn from those examples where, you don't need to just air out all of that stuff in public. You got to do it outside of that, because this is a war we're in. And all of that stuff is seen. All of that stuff can also motivate others to follow suit, which then again, you're creating that division. It doesn't have to be like that. It's like, it got to be in a way where we're able to just principally within look in, so that we're not just, this reactionary hype is what, it's also something that is, people make money off of that. And it just further divides the whole thing.
To the point, Imam Jamil Alamin, everybody in the Black community must organize. And then we decide whether we will have alliance with other people or not until we are organized. So there are people like, well, I have this suggestion for you, whatever. It's like, okay, you organize your people. There are particular needs that our community has that we have to deal with on our terms. But once, we get it together, we can work with you. So yes, we actually do organize with, for example, the Irish Republican Socialists. There are a lot of organized spaces we deal with, but there's an understanding that the common struggle is in land. So yes, not over telling them like, oh, well, this is what you need to do, and they're not telling us what we need to do, but we understand there is a common struggle. We understand the Palestinian liberation struggle. We understand the struggle for Northern Ireland and the 6 counties. We understand all of these struggles are about land and against colonialism and imperialism in many spaces. The US is an imperial core. The US is settler colonial, just like Brazil is, just like all of these, Israel is settler colonial. So all of these stolen lands have a common understanding about what liberation is. So of course, we work with organizations dealing with liberatory struggles from the land. Because there was a autobiography of Malcolm X. He was talking about, there was a white girl that came up to me. He's like, well, how can we help you? It's just like, organize your people.
Organize your people.
We have to deal with our struggles as African people, but as a person who is of European descent, your ancestors contributed to a lot of the conditions that existed. So organize against the system that your ancestors created.
Yeah. Talk to your family members, talk to your church members and your homies at your ski clubs and your hockey events and soccer or wherever your friends are, organize your people. That's everyone's responsibility. That's something I understood really early. You can't get away from that.
So there's another quote. An old African leader says that leadership should never be shared. It should always remain in the hands of the dispossessed people. We will lead the revolution. Another aspect of, so someone who is a representative of the system of oppression, you should never ask them for assistance in liberation. That literally makes no sense. So again, someone who's saying that they love their people and vote these people in who literally work against the liberation of the people, you do love your people. Leadership should not be shared. And I'm going to add, leadership should not be individualized. So everyone's like, well, we need a new Malcolm X. We need a new Martin Luther King. We need a new this. No, we should all be doing that work.
Right, absolutely. Collectively.
And they literally said this before they were assassinated. Martin Luther King said, I may not get there with you.
Right.
The night before he passed, I may not get there with you, but I'm here.
Right.
Here are tools you can do.
Here are tools you can use. I mean,
I'm not going to be here, so keep doing the work. Martin Luther King's literally saying that, and people, oh, Martin Luther King's gone. What are we going to do?
What are we going to do? It's like, continue to work. It did not end, and it's not going to stop.
MLK literally said the day before he was assassinated, do the work. I was one of the people who participated in that, but just like the rest of y'all, I'm not going to be here forever. So here are some tools. So it's like creating the organization Afro-American Unity or all of these things. And there were tools, foundations laid so the masses could continue that work. Because like anyone else, it's just like the leader may be gone, but the ideas continue to be around. So again, those ideas that have been laid so the rest of us can do that work. And that is where the love comes in. People who laid that foundation love their people enough to lay their foundation. Right. And we can't sit here and go, okay, I'm going to read the book or whatever. Oh, that was great. Malcolm X is gone. Okay, what we do now? Yeah,
it's like no.
So we have to do, like, there are organizations like the Malcolm X grassroots movement. And so they have the new African Scouts that are, so it's like young people coming up so they can continue doing this work. There was a book, The Young Lords, here's an example, the people who love their people, enough to understand that this is a mass struggle. From this book, it talks about largely unexplored in the historiography of urban 1960s activism, the upsurge of community-based activism led by Black Africans in America and Puerto Rican mothers helped for routine activities of like the Black Panthers and the Young Lords. From Chicago and Oakland to New York, both organizations offered security at civil disobedience actions taken by these women welfare centers. Mixture of redemption and vacation, the Young Lords and the Black Panthers collected clothing from the avaricious businessmen in the community and redistributed to poor mothers and others in needs. The jointly held free clothing programs on Saturdays from 30 to 3:30 at the Theater Arts Center on 110th Street in Lexington and Park Avenues. The Young Lords also worked in tandem with the Panthers to establish a free daily children's breakfast program at Amos House on 116th between and 3rd Avenues in East Harlem. Established in the context of solidarity work with others, these programs certainly possess the patriarchal print of provision and protection of women and children. So a lot of contradictions there. But with the growth of female membership in the Young Lords and the group's continued interactions with welfare rights and school reform organizers, a disproportionate number of whom were women, gender norms in the organization would soon be challenged. So therein lies a problem. What's the solution that we can utilize? All the solidarity extended to women of color by the Young Lords and the Panthers, humanistic neighborhood relationship among them, the mothers to trust the disproportionately male members of these groups to feed and care for the children. So one of the things that is rooted in organization is building relationships. So you can't go into a particular community and say, here, we're here to help you. We're here just, giving you charity or whatever. You have to assure that the people in the community feel like and know can achieve self-determination at some point. No, it's not going to happen in 2 seconds based on societal conditions, material conditions. Know that they have the tools to create their own liberatory process. And that's what it's about. That is a huge aspect of organizing. So here's another thing. In September 1969, the Young Lords began to experiment with a neighborhood police watch. The idea evolved out of the relationships the group fostered with many residents of El Barrio during the garbage offensive. The Young Lords Minister of Information, Pablo Guzman, described it as a people's patrol, an underground movement of the people on the block in the Latin community, similar to the way the Panthers started out in Oakland. The Panthers' decision to legally bear arms to protect the descendants of slaves from police violence challenged rooted power relations. Though unstated, the tradition that became enshrined in the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution as the right to bear arms has been understood to apply exclusively to Europeans and their descendants. The reasons are found in the 18th century settler project that became the United States, which rested on violent appropriation of land from native people of North in control of enslaved African labor. In defense, the indigenous population responded with an early form of guerrilla war, and Africans organized slave rebellions. In this contest, the emerging government weaponized Europeans of all classes, a measure necessary to secure, maintain, and extend the emerging borders of the state. So that's an aspect of it. And that's the thing I think even Europeans need to realize, that these amendments to the Constitution, etc., were not created equally. So people took their liberation in their own hands, obviously. And as a response, just like what happened with 1811, just like what happened with the Mulford Act, now we're going to create gun control. Ooh, the NRA, they supported gun control then. There's a bunch of Africans with guns. So you had the Mulford Act supported by Reagan and all of this stuff. So we need to understand that aspect of history. And people, why is the NRA sides when an African was killed? Look at the history of the NRA.
Right.
And that'll answer your question. So yeah, self-love, you have to understand their problem. And you have to go, how can we address that with a particular solution? but it cannot be rooted in individualism. If you love your people, you have to take the people with you along for that ride of liberation. There's
Absolutely.
no other way around that. And the way to do that is through organization.
That's the way to do it, y'all. You gotta organize. You gotta organize. That's the way to do it, because our people, we divided. We got these systems of capitalism. We got imperialism. We got colonialism. We got patriarchy. We got all these isms that are just diseasing and crippling our minds. But there is a solution, and that's collective organizing. And I know this is being premiered on what this capitalist holiday knows as Valentine's Day. But honestly, if you want love, the best way to show that love is to do it for your people. Do it for your people, because our ancestors did it for us, and that's why we're here.
I don't know about you, but I am my ancestors.
Yeah, I am. I am my ancestors. And I'm appreciative and thankful of them all the time, every day, because they did this work. And it wasn't comfortable either. We can also just, I want to briefly mention that it's not always comfortable to confront that thing that's looking at you, and to look in the eye of that thing, and to really struggle with it. Because as mentioned, it can coming out of that other things that you're not really prepared for, but you're better for it, because by acknowledging it, you can then, reach for that solution. So it's not comfortable, but our ancestors were far more uncomfortable and had to endure far more. That's the way I look at it. It's like they did it, so ain't no reason why we can't.
Internet, computers, all of these things, the technological advances that exist, we as a people have no excuse about organizing. Like, we just have so many facilities to do that. Yeah, in some aspects, depending on where we live, there might be limited internet service. If you go in particular places around the world, they have even less internet service, but they are still organizing. There are people who have particular hours they can use the internet, but they are doing this work. If you are saying they're on the internet all day and social media and saying there's a problem, what is your excuse? If you say you love your people, you have no excuse. There are people, as you mentioned, Jesse, we're struggling so much more. They didn't have the technology.
Yeah.
And they were enslaved. Some of us were enslaved and had to figure out, well, Massa went out partying. Did you know what your wrist that was? Like, when's he gonna come back? We don't know. We don't have watches.
Right.
They can come back anytime. So, they had even more of a struggle. They read a book or had someone teach them, they got beat. So, there were so many more obstacles to achieving liberation for our people than there are now. So there
Absolutely.
Definitely we're saying you can do it, that you can do it in an organized way, that you can't form an organization or join one. Absolutely no excuse. So do you have any final words for love of the people?
I think we've said a lot, but again, harping back on that, genuine love is responded by knowledge of what that problem is. And I think we know that problem, and that enemy is capitalism. And just talking about this today just revitalized my love and need for this organizing work, because it is that medicine, it is that continual ideological framework that gives me that criticism whenever it shows up, and puts me on the level where it's like, yo, you can do something. We can all do something. It's been done, and let's continue it. Let's do it. Why not? We have every motivation to do so. So I'm encouraged in that fashion, and would encourage everyone listening to forward ever in that light as well.
And it is interesting that we have done this episode, because there was an episode of our voices that also covered love of the people. So I think this is right on time. Nice. And there was the Pan-African film series that our territory comrades did, talked about these very things. So I think just the more we talk about it, the more we feel it, the more we acknowledge just love of the people, the ancestors will hopefully hear it, and we can continue this work. You or I may not even be here tomorrow, but put something in place, hopefully that makes the ancestors proud. And It shouldn't be a focus on the physical bodies of people, because that's one thing and sure in life, we ain't gonna be here forever.
Right.
So what legacy, quote unquote, argument is not legacy the way that is deemed under capitalism. Like, my legacy is I'm gonna have a bunch of kids and own this, that, or the other, and generational wealth. That's not what we're talking about. The legacy we're addressing, what are we leaving behind for future generations towards our liberation? Like,
Yes.
how are we contributing to that? And that is the legacy that I would like to contribute to. I just say it. So, even if you did own a house, even if you did have all of this money or whatever, you can still contribute. If you have a ton of money, how are you contributing that way to our liberation?
Right.
Are you feeding the people? What are you doing? You literally have the money to do that, ability to do that. Are you keeping that for yourself? You're like, well, I'm giving that to my dog, like Leon and him, whatever. Yeah. How are you contributing to that? So, like, you could be like, well, I'm giving, when I leave, I'm bequeathing all my money to an organization, whatever.
Yeah.
However you want to do it, but contributing to some way, whether it's financial, especially ideologically, that should be happening anyway. Whatever means that you're doing it, contribute to our liberation, whether it's just cooking food to somebody, whether it's reading minutes, whatever that is. Organizing is not fancy work, and I think that's what scares a lot of people. The important thing is that it's getting done.
Yes.
And that is getting back to the point, the subject at hand. It's about love for the people. And if you truly say you love your people, you got to show it. You can't just say it. Was it, if you love me, if you love me, say it, don't say it.
Right. Say it.
Don't just say it.
Yeah.
Do it. Do it every single day of your life. Like, you love someone once a year. It's like
Right.
Mother's Day.
Mother's Day. That's what capitalism tells us to do.
Mother's Day.
Right.
It's like, no. You love
Every
someone,
day.
you show
Every
them
day. Every day. It's because it's like it's an everyday thing.
every single day. And the struggle is real every single day. As long as capitalism exists, we're going to struggle against it every day. How are we going to struggle against it? The best way to do that is to join an organization. That's the best way to do it.
Collective organizing, y'all. Don't do it in the
we
vacuum.
have to do it. And so there are our comrades. So we also, already mentioned the Pan-African film series, but they also do bi-weekly Pan-African news program. So that is, again, our comrades in Tiwa territory or the New Mexico chapter. There's our ancestors' voices. That is Shakur and Ajamu, beautiful father and daughter duo. They are awesome. Every week. So we also have our comrades doing the Revolutionary African Women podcast and the Forward Ever podcast. So there are so many ways. We just named 4, but there are just so many. I feel like there are so many connections that have been made and people joining, whether it's the A-APRP or another revolutionary organization, because of this work being done. This is not, we want to sit here and be on camera and just talk about, we're actually doing things. And we are hoping to encourage others to do similar work because, again, the struggle is real. Capitalism, yes, is dying, but it's still very alive and well. So, and we ain't gonna be here forever again.
Right.
If we love our people, we have to understand the impermanence of life. How are we going to deal with this legacy that we're leaving behind? Join an organization. I feel like we should just do an episode, and the episode should just be called Join an Organization, and then we'll just sit there.
I'm about to say we have so many.
Join an organization.
Join an organization.
2 seconds. Every 2 seconds, like, that's the episode. It'll be like a 5-minute episode. Like,
join an organization.
Or maybe it'll be an hour and a half, and that's all we say. And people are like, what is this? And you're like, trying to tell you, we're gonna do this so everybody joins the organization.
Right.
For an hour and a half. And we're gonna have a marathon, just like it's gonna be a live stream that's like 24 hours, just like, and then it's gonna be like different people.
They're like, why are we here? And we would just comment, join the organization, join the organization, join the organization. Like, that's the way.
So, what have we been saying? Join your organization if you love your people. Love is not conditional.
No, it's not.
Love is not transactional. If you love your people, that is unconditional. And of course, that comes with a process of self-critique. It comes with a process of critique itself, because that is love. And critique is not negative. So join an organization and take part in the process of self-critique, because you love your people. You say it. I'm not going to believe you till I see proof. That's
Till we see it.
Join an organization for your people. But as we say every single week, besides joining an organization, forward
ever. Which, by the way, go to the Forward Ever Etsy shop and pick up your merch, where we have shirts, propagandized apparel, where you can, support revolutionary organization. But yes, Forward Ever, backwards never.